Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic podcast. Today I'm joined by Rich Vreeland, a composer under the name of DisasterPeace, an electronic chiptune composer that you might recognize for his work with video games such as Hyper Light Drifter, Fez, his work with TV and film such as It Follows and the guest animated episode of Adventure Time, Bad Jubies, as well as his own studio albums. Hi, Rich. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. So why don't you tell people about yourself just to get a good footing before we go forward?
Sure. My name is Rich. I've been interested in music and sound for a while, and I've been doing it professionally for a while. I originally was interested in graphic design, and then I decided to switch gears, got into music, started writing music for games. And after doing music for games for a long time, I kind of stumbled into doing television and film as well, and also got pretty interested in technology. And yeah, that's a pretty basic overview.
Yeah, and that's pretty interesting. You know, the step from one creative realm to another. I myself have a degree in graphic design, and I don't make much use of it. Don't really know why I'm mentioning that, but you know. Um, so, what was it that made you take the step into playing around with music to kind of put it as a career, if you will?
It sort of just came to fruition over time. I initially thought that graphic design was going to be my pursuit because that's what I was interested in. That's what I was good at. I was already doing it for work. I worked at a website company when I was in high school, did a bunch of freelancing. But then I kind of got into music at the same time, and over time, my interest in that grew. And I really decided that I wanted to pursue it. I didn't necessarily know what that would look like, but in the beginning, I was like, well, maybe I'll work in a music studio. I have no idea. And it took time for me to kind of figure out what the options were.
Mhm.
I needed to just try a lot of different things. And I was fortunate enough to work on some game projects pretty early on without even, I wasn't really looking for work per se. I was even before college, before music school. But someone that I knew online saw just a wanted ad on a message board for music for a cell phone game, and I'd been posting music at this forum, and he put my name out there, and I followed up with them and ended up doing some projects for them, and that was my first experience writing music for a game and getting paid, and that experience sort of shifted my sense of what I might do. Because before that, I didn't really imagine that I could make music for a living.
Hmm. And that's really neat, because there's for everyone I've talked to, there seems to be, or for the most, there seems to be like a common theme of luck, um, kind of playing a part in getting started, or maybe not getting started, but getting your foot, through the door. So that's interesting that you kind of started just putting your stuff out there, and then luck so had it someone wanted music, and you were kind of right there for them. Is there any advice outside of just getting lucky, because kind of being in the right place at the right time is not something you can easily aim to do, but is there
Yeah.
any advice you might have for people looking into getting into the video game music industry?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any way that you can sort of um, shortcut your way. It's just kind
Hmm.
of there's definitely luck to it, luck involved. But for me, my once I was lucky enough to get in that situation where I had a couple opportunities. After that, I mean, that dried up, and so I needed to find a way to carry on and to continue doing that. And so the way that I was able to continue was to just keep finding ways to put myself out there and to express an interest and a desire to do it, and to share my interest and my work with people. So from the very beginning, kind of running counter to what a lot of other musicians might do who like say release albums and stuff. I would just release everything pretty much. And so I wasn't shy about releasing my music and posting it and hearing what people had to say. And I sort of I appreciated all the feedback, whether it was positive or negative. It was just interesting. And beyond that, I just saw this horizon of possibilities for me that I could try, whether it was getting involved with live performance
Hmm.
or they were going to music school, going to events. Um, there's a lot of opportunities to go to, um, like video game related and like industry type events. People like-minded people who are interested in games, game jams. I applied to a bunch of internships. Uh, found found some places online where some communities that were about independent game development and kind of got involved that way. So I had a lot of different things going at the same time, whether it was like sort of my personal music and live performance, or getting into indie games, or joining the video game music club at Berkeley. Had going to conferences. Like I had all these different things going, and they all contributed to my ability to just get out there and like meet new people and just find new things to do to keep my interest in music going.
And yeah, that's real great advice. It sounds like I'm gonna distill it a little, and I apologize if I distill it incorrectly. But it sounds almost like just putting yourself out there and just having a endless drive, if you will, to pursue what you enjoy and what you want to do. Is kind of what you're saying. Am I getting that right?
Basically, yeah. I mean, it was just yeah, I had to kind of step out of my comfort zone and just kind of put myself out there, put myself in enough situations that I had an opportunity to do something new.
Hmm.
And I kind of just kept doing that until I was fortunate enough to get into some, I would say, like luckier kind of situations. Like in order to, I think, put myself in a situation where I could be lucky to say, work on a successful project or something like that. Before that, I did a lot of just a lot of repetition as far as like working on lots of projects and releasing lots of music and going to lots of events and meeting lots of new people and all those sorts of things.
Hmm. And yeah, all of that is great advice. So thank you for sharing your how you kind of got here and the steps taken. That's great.
Sure.
Now I do have a question just from what you said. We're about the same age, give or take. And you mentioned posting your music on forums and such. Did did you miss the mark on Newgrounds when they kind of opened up to the music scene and a lot of people started to actually I shouldn't say a lot. I don't know the actual quantity of this compared to their games and such. But did you get a were you a part of that scene, or were there was it different forums and the like?
I was minimally involved in Newgrounds,
Mhm.
probably around before I got into music, really, probably like 2002 ish. I was on Newgrounds. I was making stick animation videos,
Mhm.
and then I would check Newgrounds occasionally to check out animations and games and stuff, and then I did a game, music for a game on Newgrounds at some point, maybe like 2009, 2010. This game called Catastrophe. But the initial sort of opportunities that I got with games were on a forum that has nothing to do with games really. Well, some sort of like tangentially related. I had this I had this passion for wrestling when I was a kid, and as a teenager, I got really into this thing called e-wrestling, which
Mhm.
is like competitive fan fiction where you make your own wrestler and you have you have like fictitious matches that are written out and fictitious events and stuff. And so there's a lot of writing, a lot of creative writing involved, and people would display their writing in these like HTML formats with like lots of graphics and music, and I got into making all that stuff for other people in addition to being a part of just participating and having my own wrestler and all that kind of stuff. And it was actually towards the end of my interest in that. I started doing that when I was probably like 13 or something, and I did it for a couple of years. um, it was towards the end of my sort of interest in that stuff. But I was just hanging out like on the message boards, and I would post my music when I first started getting into music, and that was where my first foray into music, writing music for games, happened. And then it wasn't until a few years later that I kind of discovered some other scenes. A big one was TIG Source, the independent game source, which is a forum where it just happened to be a forum where a lot of really well-known independent games got their start as far as like a community goes. I mean, the developers for Fez and Spelunky and Minecraft all kind of hung out there, and so I kind of stumbled into that scene and started doing some work that way. That was probably a few years later that I found that.
Hmm. And that's interesting because I'm not really aware of those sides of things. Um, but the wrestling thing, not to dwell too much on it, but that's pretty amusing that you started out effectively role playing, and uh, in my younger years as well, I would role play with um, video game RPGs or what have you, similar to the wrestling, of course, but not wrestling. But never were they so elaborate that people were doing graphics or animations or music. So that's a pretty wild way to get started in my opinion, and that's pretty great, and just wild and amusing at the same time.
Yeah, it's a pretty weird story, but it's I still like wrestling, so.
Well, I'm not trying to say anything bad about wrestling, and that it's a great story. I want to be clear on that one. I'm not trying to speak down to it all because I think it's just fantastic. But in defense of wrestling as well, I whenever I do read about it, it always seems hilariously absurd in like the same way that like a Spanish novella is, or in some plot lines, I guess you would say. Like it's as wild as some really off the wall Japanese animation kind of stuff, where it's just you know
Yeah,
it's it's just wild and fantastic in every way possible. When you can just sort of accept that, it gets even more enjoyable, in my opinion, at least.
I think anime and telenovelas, those are really good analogs to wrestling because it's just so melodramatic.
Yes, thank you,
Um,
that's the word.
yeah, for sure.
Now, as much as I'd love to keep talking about those topics, I do have some other questions for you.
Sure.
So, what was your favorite game as a child, and what kind of made that your favorite game?
Um, my favorite game as a child. Well, the first system that I had access to was a Nintendo. My parents had a Nintendo. They separated when I was 3, but they lived at my grandmother's house. I remember.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I liked playing Mario and Tetris and Tecmo Super Bowl. I was really into sports growing up and cars. Really into both of those things. And then when the Genesis came out, I got a Genesis. My mom got me a Genesis, and my dad got me a Super Nintendo. And so my sort of the visitation schedule that I had going back and forth, it kind of in my head it sort of revolved around whether I was going to get to play Genesis or Super Nintendo because I was just so enamored with it.
Mhm.
And In those early years, I was really really into, like I said, I was really into sports games and driving games. NHL '94, pretty much NHL, the hockey games every year. That was my prized possession. And I didn't get into I was always into Mario games, but I didn't really get into other types of games as much until later. Um, I didn't get into RPGs until I got Chrono Cross for Christmas.
Mhm.
So I was at that point I was maybe was like 13 or something like that. Chrono Cross, and then I had borrowed Super Mario RPG from a friend of mine, and that's when I got into RPGs and I got really into role playing. Um, I also, was like I was hanging out on AOL chat rooms, and I was doing all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm. And that's eh, would it be fair to ask, or appropriate really to ask, did you play video games with your parents at all, or was that sort of a thing that they just gave you and left you to?
yeah, a little. We played. I mean, I played with my dad a little bit, but not too much. I was also like a really sore loser as a kid, so they probably didn't want to play with me that much if it was competitive. I played with my I played with my sister and my stepsister. We would play Top Gear. I
Mhm.
remember playing that a lot. But for the most part, I play by myself. Um, I did a lot of solo play. Like we'd ever go, whenever we go somewhere like a family member or something. I'd disappear into some like room, if there was a computer or something, and I'd be like, I'd be experimenting with like whatever sort of software they had.
Yeah.
Whether it was like one of those like monthly floppy disks that had games on it, or Prodigy or AOL or whatever. I was just kind of messing with all that stuff.
Hmm. Now, it sounds like from what you said, you kind of got into RPGs, like you said, around 13ish, which I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be kind of around the time that you probably started to, or would have been able to appreciate um, the music or the soundtracks that you were hearing. So, do you have a favorite game soundtrack that that from that era?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I would say my appreciation for game music, it was retroactive.
Hmm.
Like it wasn't until I started making music that I really started to appreciate a lot of the video game music that I had grown up with. So when I started making music in like 2003 or 2004, that's when I started really getting into video game music and realized how diverse and interesting it was. And as far as some of the soundtracks that I really liked, they tended to be ones that I had a lot of spent a lot of time listening to, or playing the games. So games like Marble Madness for NES, and Chrono Cross for PlayStation, um, Super Mario RPG. I mean, the games I sunk a lot of time into, or just were unusual in some way. Like the music in Marble Madness is pretty bizarre by can like standard by any sort of like normal standard for game music. It's pretty different. So it
Nightmarish
stuck with
even.
me. What's that?
Nightmarish even. Sorry to have interrupted.
Yeah, yeah. So it stuck with me because it's unusual.
Okay, that's interesting. Mostly the Madness thing being interesting. I'm relieved to hear that the other options were not surreal and long lasting traumatic events, or at least for me, Marble Madness was. Um,
Well, to be fair, I don't think I ever beat. I probably barely beat a single level of that game, but I liked the music.
mhm. Now, I have to ask this, and I'm sorry, but what was it about it that made you like it? The music, that is.
Oh, well, it's hard to say. I think in the beginning there was a really strong nostalgia level for video game music from games that I had played.
Hmm.
Um, and it's hard for me to separate the nostalgia factor from like genuinely appreciating things at that stage of my like development as a human being. I think uh things that you come across at that age It has a maybe it just has a way of like weaseling its way into your brain, and it almost feels arbitrary in a sense. That, oh, I like this, and I this stood out to me more than this or whatever. But from a more detached point of view, like looking back at a game like that, the music is very it has a sort of a prog rock kind of feel to it. There's a lot of odd metering, and there's just a lot of like unusual harmonic choices. It's just very it's very quirky, and I've definitely um I have a deep appreciation for there's a lot of quirky music that I like. So that would be my best guess at sort of like, trying to rationalize why. But I mean, obviously, I couldn't tell you for sure, but that's just kind of my guess at this point.
And that makes sense. And thank you for sharing that, by the way. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, and like, at no point was that meant to be kind of um, putting you down for liking it. You know, as someone that for whatever reason also really enjoyed playing that game a lot and being both intrigued and terrified by it. Um, yeah, so like that wasn't meant to be in any way negative when I asked that. It was just the getting your view on it. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Now, now do you have any like current favorite game soundtracks, or are they all kind of, I don't want to say indifferent in a bad way, but or is it kind of you haven't really landed on any recently?
Um, yeah, there's been some lately. Sure. The last one that I really liked was this game called Mutazione. It's an adventure game that takes place on an island, and it has a really jam oriented, laid back kind of quality to it. It's really nice to hear music like that in a game,
Hmm.
and it's implemented in a really smart way. It's not just like, you know thrown in there, which sometimes music that's performed by a band can have that quality to it. Uh, so that's a really nice one. And then pretty much anything that Tomas Dvorak has done, like Machinarium or Samarost. Pretty much all of his work is really, really great. And then I have a colleague who I actually came up with. We met and we met on the Mini Bosses message board. If you're familiar with the Mini Bosses, they're like a video game cover band,
Oh, okay.
and we actually started a net label together in, gosh, 2007 maybe. He goes by he used to go by Phlogiston, but his name is Eirik Circa, and he did the music for Spelunky.
Oh, okay.
And he's also done the music for games like Downwell. Um, he's one of my favorites too. I love his music.
Well, that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. I'm not overly familiar with the games you said. I'm gonna have to take another swing at them and just sort of listen to them, because if someone else says it's good music, it never hurts to pay attention to it a little more.
Uh huh.
Now, what is it about gaming that you enjoy? Like, what is it that makes it enjoyable to you? And, what do you look for when you want to enjoy a game? I know that I settled enjoy a lot there. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. That's an interesting question. Um, I think I like I like to I like to be taken to like a new world, like a world that's unfamiliar, that has like kind of a thoughtful and sort of coherent sense of itself, like a sense of identity. Um, and I'm really interested in like sort of like novel concepts in games, novel mechanics, novel presentation. Um, um, yeah, I mean, I would say. in the past, I've kind of looked to games as a form of escapism in some sense, and I would certainly be dropping hundreds of hours into like World of Warcraft or Skyrim or something like that. But at this stage, I think I'm less motivated by those those sorts of things.
Hmm.
It's like thinking about being a kid and playing driving games, being like, oh, this is so cool. But when you become an adult and you actually drive, it kind of loses a little bit of its luster, I would say.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm really interested in like expression and um, I'm really aesthetically oriented, so I tend to gravitate towards things that are doing something aesthetically that I find to be engrossing like a different way.
Hmm. And right now, you kind of like to get to those kind of games. You're kind of in luck, just because with the ability for everyone to make games and game jams that are happening all the time. There's a lot of games that are I don't want to say throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, but they're kind of taking a uh, avant-garde, or that's probably being used wrong, but they're taking like a novel approaches to things and trying to see what creative and unique uh, styles or elements that they can incorporate into their games. So you know if you're looking for that kind of stuff, now is a real good time for it, as opposed to like 10, 15 years ago, when you were lucky if there was one or two games that were kind of breaking the mold on what was going to be able to sell, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say I would say that we're almost too lucky in the sense that there's such like a we're like so inundated with new content all the time.
Hmm.
It's hard to like navigate all of it. And if you think about the culture in the past, people's relationships to games and other art forms like music, like recorded music is a good one too. People growing up in like the 60s and 70s, they might have a couple of records. And even into the 90s, when I was growing up, I only had, so many compact discs that I would listen to. So I spent just, I think by default, I spent more quality, intimate time with those records or games. Whereas now, like games have become so commodified because there's so many of them that I think over like as a culture, like our attention spans have diminished um, to some degree, uh, and so yeah, it is really great in certain respects, but in other ways, it's just really challenging because there's just so much stuff being made all the time.
I'd never thought about it that way, and as you're explaining that, I went through a moment of kind of being amused and then kind of depressed, only because as you're saying that, I'm looking at how many demos I've downloaded in the last like 2 days for this current Steam Game Festival, and I've downloaded like 42, and I'm I'm looking for something, but it
Yeah,
didn't dawn on me that it's you're right, it's and not to say anything negative about any of the games going in that festival, but it's
it's
you
hard to
know
appreciate.
yes,
It's
yeah.
hard to appreciate art when you're trying to interface with so much of it in a short period of time.
Hmm.
Like as human beings, I feel like there's just a limited capacity to really engage with stuff. Um, and it's easy to lose sight of that, I think, in the modern age, just because everything is so readily accessible, whether it's games or music or video or like other visual medias and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. If I might just refer to it as that instant gratification setup that we've kind of found ourselves in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so thank you for that. I now feel a little depressed. Um,
Anytime.
um, So let's try and shift it back to a maybe a more enjoyable question, not a depressing one. Um, what is your current favorite game, if you have one?
Um, let's see. I haven't been playing a lot of games on my own lately.
Hmm.
The last game I started on my own was Alba, the new game from Us Two, and it's pretty cool. I went through a phase where I was playing a lot of Picross. I love Picross, uh, but like most of the gaming I've been doing has been multiplayer with friends.
Hmm.
I played a bit of Star Wars Squadrons and um, golf with friends and Among Us and Fall Guys and Worms, which is it's always fun to go back and play Worms.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I don't know how to answer that question exactly, but those are some of the things that I've played lately. I
Hmm.
would like to, it'd be nice to have make a little bit more time to just like sit down and play a game. But that hasn't really been a priority lately, but
Hmm.
I could see it being one again at some point because there are a lot of games that I would like to sit down and play. Um, one that comes to mind is Disco Elysium, which I'd really like to sit down and play at some point.
Yeah, and that one I've only heard good things about it. I myself haven't had a chance to get to sit down and play it either. So we're kind of both on the same page for that one. And in general, really, I think being able to sit down and have I'm going to call it in quotes here long form um, enjoyment for a game. Because like
Yeah.
for me, a lot of games that I play right now typically are games that you can play in like bite sized um, just sit down for 30 minutes and play a game, and it kind of resolves itself.
Hmm.
um so yeah, I can definitely appreciate and also look forward to that time where you can block out enough time to play a long form game that kind of takes 10, 20, or whatever amount of time.
Yeah. I think increasingly my desire to play long form games is I don't really have one. It's more. I mean, if a game hooks me and pulls me in, then I will play a long form game. I mean, I played through Breath of the Wild and Red Dead Redemption 2 as two examples.
Hmm.
Um, but sometimes long form games can feel like work, and I'm just not. I'm not as motivated by games that feel like work anymore. uh, it's very. I would say my relationship to playing games is somewhat. If it's either social or it's kind of emotional. It's like, what do I feel like playing right now? Like what would be the most satisfying experience?
Hmm.
I'm not really, you know, um, not really looking to, feel like I'm doing some sort of labor most of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I recently tried one of those house building games, or just one of those sim games,
Yeah.
and I kind of started it, and then about 15, 20 minutes in, where I had to do the same thing like for the fifth time, I went, this is work. I don't,
Yep.
I so yeah, so I definitely appreciate that, and I think a lot of people can as well, where a lot of people also enjoy having the ability to just play something like that and turn their mind off. But
Yeah.
you know I nothing against any of those people. I think it's also just a perfectly valid sentiment to
Yeah.
not,
I
right.
think I think there's a certain amount of just relativity to it as far as like, you know, where you are in your life and what you're doing. Like when I was younger, I had a lot more willingness to play games that felt like work because I wasn't really working.
Yeah.
I think now, things are very different. So, I tend to want to spend my free time in a different way.
And yeah, like that makes sense, right? Like when you're, because I can also go back to that one. Like when you're young, you have all this free time, and when you start having to work a full-time job with other commitments and all of that, the amount of time really whittles away, and you want to spend that in a meaningful and enjoyable way that doesn't frustrate you or leave you more exhausted.
Yeah, your capacity for those kind of things like frustration might be different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know how much interaction you would have as a musician, so forgive me if this question is kind of missing the mark. However, how do you feel about the current landscape for interacting with your fans? Whether it be due to music stuff or movie stuff or your studio stuff. Like how does that work for you with Twitter and the ability to just shout out at someone and look into the big board and see lots of people potentially shouting at you or trying to communicate with you or what have you.
Yeah, I would say that my situation, I've been fortunate in the sense that I could kind of choose the level of involvement that I wanted to have in those avenues.
Hmm.
It's a little harder to sort of opt out of like say social media from like a business kind of perspective. Um, Although it's possible, certainly there are other ways to interact with people besides social media. Um, but I would say, at this point, I don't find a lot of value in social media. I find some value in it in the sense that you can relay information to
Hmm.
people, but I particularly loathe the idea of being on a platform where someone is controlling what people see. Like that just is not something that I'm down with at all. So over time, like I've become less and less engaged with social media to the point where I don't really. If people hit me up down there, I'll like respond to them. But I don't check it every day. I do most of my I try to have a strong web presence in other ways. Like I have a really comprehensive website.
Hmm.
I do a mailing list. I have a YouTube channel, so I'll post videos occasionally. Um, and so, I don't really actively or go out of my way to engage with people because I just don't find those. Um, I find that those connections tend to be, on average, they tend to be of a lower quality than the kinds that I can make in real life. So I don't really go out of my way to do it, but I do. I am open to talking to people. Anyone who's reached out to me for the most part would tell you that I'm pretty accessible and happy to talk about stuff. Um, but as far as me, like engaging with social media beyond kind of being a one-way channel, I don't really at this point.
And yeah, that makes sense. I typically in my personal life kind of take the same approach. So that makes perfect sense. And trying to figure out how that one-way channel needs to work can also kind of be tricky. So always um, good to hear. It's not the I'm not the only one that's kind of, I don't want to say perplexed, but kind of looking at it from a standpoint of how does this work, or does
Yeah,
it need to work.
how do I navigate this weird thing that everyone takes for granted now? That's
Exactly, yeah.
totally it's totally unusual way to communicate with people.
And yeah, it really is. Like I'm personally struggling to figure out the best way to go about it. And
Yeah.
it's just everything I look at trying to do, I just look at it going like, this is the Wild West to me. I don't know if it's just because I was a late adopter, or if it's because I um, just have always kind of been more of a private person. But
Yeah.
I'm not here to try and to dump my views or my quote unquote problems with it. Just sort of relating and sharing that yeah, it can be a weird thing to try and figure out, and set up those personal boundaries and such, you know?
Yeah, it took me a long time to kind of come to some sort of approach, and it certainly has evolved over time. Um, in the beginning of social media, things were very, very different. There was a lot of levity, and it was very laid back.
Mhm.
People were posting about their, the scrambled eggs they had. Like, it was really different. Uh, things are way different now,
Yes.
and it's just a certain kind of personality, I think. Maybe uh, is more attracted to it, or maybe thrives in that environment. For me personally, like, it doesn't really do anything for me. It
Mhm.
just brings me grief. Like, it just makes me unhappy. Like, overall. So I kind of just decided, I'm in a position where I'm fortunate enough that I don't really have to, I don't have to, like, be on social media all the time, like, trying to get people's attention. Um, I don't really need to do that. So I've just kind of moved in the opposite direction. And I deleted my Facebook page as an example, and it hasn't really made any difference at all. So, because a lot of the engagement you get on social media is also tends to be kind of shallow.
Mhm.
Um, if you're thinking about it from, like, I don't know, like a sort of like fan base kind of way of thinking about it, the engagement that you get from a mailing list is far greater, um, and you can sort of, like, separate the wheat from the chaff and just engage with the people who are genuinely interested in what you're doing, and not try to, like, reel in people who don't really care. And maybe they liked one thing you did or whatever, and now you're, like, trying desperately to get them to pay attention to you. Like, it's not a good way to run a business, or to try to build some sort of following or whatever. I think it's, you know you don't want to focus too much on that, I would say.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. You're saying all this, and I'm kind of sitting in, I guess, awe, maybe. Um, just having this make sense to me. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, and part of what you also said is, yeah, like, your mental health also is just better when you aren't having to worry about all of that. So that's always a good thing. Good mental health can typically lead to better. I don't want to say work because it's such a vague uh, topic, but I think I'm just going to use it anyway. But, like, better mental health can typically lead to better work or better. Um,
It would affect all areas of your life.
yes, thank you. Yes, that's what I was struggling to find a word for. Yeah.
Totally.
So I'm gonna try and bring it to another potentially uh, depressing question here. But
None of
was
this is
there?
depressing to me. I hope you're not feeling depressed.
Well, a little bit earlier. Um,
Okay.
when it comes to games that you enjoyed as a child, are there any that you went back to that just don't hold up today?
When I think about this question, I think about movies.
Hmm.
I was thinking about The Brave Little Toaster, because that's a movie I absolutely loved as a kid, and I tried to watch it when I was like 20, and it didn't really click for me.
Yeah.
Same with, like, Fraggle Rock. But games, it's good. It's interesting to think about it in the context of games. Hmm. Mm, there's gotta be. Well, there's certain games that have a certain allure to me, and I can't quite understand. Like, I kind of understand why I really, really, in theory, love it, but whenever I try to play it, I just can't. I can't get very far.
Hmm.
The game that I think about in that case is Morrowind, um, which is a game that I got when I was probably in high school, and I was always fascinated by it. But I also really struggled to play it. I think it's and having, like, time and space from it, and just being older, I realized how clunky of a game it is. It's, like, super clunky, but it also has some of the most interesting world building that has ever I've ever seen in a video game. Just as far as, like, the influences, the focus on religion and like politics of religion and stuff. It's like really unusual for a game to do that. It's super cool.
And like I think I can definitely relate to Morrowind on the same level. Like for me, Morrowind is a game I love the idea of, but in practice, as much as I love all the systems and the way that all those systems are meant to interact and all the things you can do, like magic crafting and just the sheer absurd amount of what you're able to do, because in that game it is a very big ocean with a good amount of depth to it. But
Mhm.
then you get playing and you learn that there is a the system for attacking has some very clunky RNG for if you hit them. And you get playing and then like you're just like a teenager that's like, oh, I'm gonna play this game. You start up for the first time and then a mud crab beats you into
Yeah.
submission
Uh-huh.
because you're trying to beat it with a stick or whatever. And then you kind of go, what's
What kind of
happening?
game is this where I can't even beat the first enemy that I run across? This is
Yeah,
ridiculous.
exactly. And
Yeah.
like, so yeah, no, with Morrowind, I 100% am on board with what you have said because yeah, for me, it's a game I 100% love everything but the gameplay of.
There's a uh there's a group that are making like a Morrowind. Can I find this? There's a group that are making like a Morrowind expansion, and oh man, I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to find this. Um,
One of those modern mods, maybe, where they're kind of trying to bring it into a Unity or something else.
they're like adding all of Morrowind to like not just Vardenfell, the island. It's like they're going out into the rest of the province and bringing it. Oh, okay, I found it. So they came up with like a list of principles for like how they go. It's this project called Tamriel Rebuilt, and I guess it's
Okay.
like, and it's specifically about Morrowind, and they have these tenets about like how to make it feel, how to make it work, basically, how to like they tried to essentialize the feeling of Morrowind, and it's really interesting. I wrote them down. You want me to read them too? They're really
Yeah,
interesting.
sure.
The first one is called the principle of alienity. What is boring and mundane is wrong. What is interesting and alien is right. Alien in excess is mundane. And then the second one is principle of interpretation. Lore is nothing but interpretation. Lore is 90% the reader's interpretation, and the remainder is the interpretation of the author. The principle of contradiction. Contradiction is not invalidation, and in a way is confirmation. Principle of mythopia. Belief makes truth. Principle of inception. Every book has an author, but that author has one as well. So it's this like very like um sort of like what do you call it? Paradoxical
Yeah.
kind of thinking about it, and but also it's it I don't know, it resonated with me, the idea of you're trying, like, basically the weirder it is, you're trying to find that balance, basically, where it's like it's weird enough, it's you go as weird as you can, but you can't go too weird because then there's no context for what it is, and people won't be able to engage with it because they have no reference point. And I think that's maybe part of what makes Morrowind effective, and like the way that it's like the world building and the aesthetic of it. It's like just right. It's like really right in that pocket of being super weird but also familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has this sort of paradoxical feeling to it that's really, really, it's just unique. It's really special. Has a really special feeling to it.
Yeah, and definitely I agree with everything you're saying, and especially the point of um you don't want to get someone comfortable with the weirdness or the absurdity. You kind of need them to stay grounded with their point of reference, so that way when they see something just bananas, it's not them going, "Oh well, yeah, I saw that, one town over, whatever."
Right.
Well, Rich, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know everyone, we have our personal lives, and I don't want to keep you from yours for much longer. However, I would be remiss if I, one, didn't, say a few things about, especially about your music, your soundtrack for Hyperlight Drifter. Um, I just wanted to note for that I was completely, and still am completely, blown away by what you were able to do with that music, with with the sounds in general for that game.
Thank
Um,
you.
there's a lot of games that I play where, and I don't mean this in any negative way when I say this. I want to be very clear with that. But when I play the games, the music is kind of just an accompaniment. It's there to be there. It provides the ambience it needs to, or it provides the moments of excitement, or leading into excitement, or what have you. I'm not really too amazing at describing music, so I'm going to be a little rough on those edges.
I
However,
get you.
when it came to Hyperlife Drifter, getting to play the game, um, and having your music with it, instead of it kind of being there as an accompaniment, and I don't mean this in a negative way, it almost felt like it was fighting for what the focus needed to be. And I say that in all of the best ways possible, where the game feel, in my opinion, is largely what's the right, it's largely enhanced by the soundtrack, in that I personally don't think the game to me would have been as enjoyable or as a magic feeling, like a good feeling, without your music. So I just wanted to, to say, wonderful job on that, and make sure I mention that, because it really is, in my opinion, like a masterclass in music or sound design, or what have you, that I don't think a lot of games really are able to pull off today, or at least ones that I have played. And like, for those have that might not have played Hyperlight Drifter, I myself have not played a whole lot of it. But for those that might not have played it at all, but have maybe played some older games, the best way that I personally can sum up just what I mean by it's masterclass tier is, for me, Chrono Trigger. The music in the soundtrack in that game is 100% something that, with just hearing it, I can be in that moment. I can be in that world. Um,
Mhm.
in an emotional kind of way, like in a that capacity. You play like a game like Mario, the Mario soundtrack, or what have you. I can be there, and I know what's happening, but it's not that same kind of bond, or link, or what have you, um as like Chrono Trigger. Hyperlight Drifter, the soundtrack you did for that, is quite possibly one of the few games I've played in the last few years that had music that was capable of doing that. So I just want to say, it's an amazing job. And it was, it's fantastic. And I just wanted to, I said, make sure I mention that, because I feel it definitely deserves the recognition, and from everyone else recognized it as well. So I'm not the only one. But I just want to say I feel it strongly deserved that recognition. You did an amazing job with it.
Thank you so much. And I would be remiss if I didn't, say that, having the creative relationship that I have with Alex, the creative director at Heart Machine. I mean, that really helped to steer everything. I had a lot of I had a lot of freedom and flexibility to kind of figure things out. And then when I was struggling, he always had really good ideas, and we sort of like, the two of us combined, kind of, we made a good team, I think, in figuring out, how to tackle things. I think, a lot of what I did on Hyperlight was informed by what I did on Fez.
Hmm.
Um, but also, trying to take that into a less iconographic place. Like, it's more, the music is more cinematic. It's but it's still environmental. A lot
Hmm.
of it is environmental storytelling. Um, yeah, and it was really hard. It was a really hard project,
And
but yeah.
and yeah, I can definitely I don't have really the chops for music, so I can't exactly relate to that. But from what you said, it sounds like there was, that good relationship kind of really allowed the two to be on the same platform going up in terms of what was trying to be delivered. But I can't imagine the difficulty for doing what you did with it. So it's hopefully it was one of those kind of challenges that when you were finished it felt good. um and like
Hmm.
I say that from the standpoint of when I did work as a graphic designer, I never really had that moment of going, oh, I did a good job here, and getting that dopamine kick that I get currently from programming, where it's like, oh, hey, this thing's broke, oh, now it's fixed, and I feel better. um get the little dog treat going. um so I can't really imagine how that would be especially in terms of making music or for like Hyperlight Drifter. But hopefully, when you were also said and done, you were able to feel that way, because like I said, it was a fantastic, truly a fantastic soundtrack for that game.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a lot of work. So I definitely felt, a sense of accomplishment and pride in it when we were, when we were finally done. Um, and when I go back and listen to it, um, I still, feel really good about what we did, and it's probably the deepest I've ever gone as far as like getting into synthesizers and sound design and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
The only thing that's close is It Follows, but that was such a different. I mean, this was very meditative, or
Hmm.
like not meditative, but it was very laborious. It was years of work, trying to irk out every kind of unique sound design, every sort of aesthetic, novel aesthetic that I could come up with, um, to fill the world of that game. So uh, yeah, it was a crazy experience for sure.
Yeah, and yeah, hopefully maybe the next time you get in that deep, if I might use that phrase, um, you're a little more. I don't want to say this in a negative way. I really hope it doesn't come across that way. But hopefully you're in a more of a better orientation to um, maybe not be as, I don't know if overwhelmed the right word, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure. I think, um, yeah, it remains to be seen, I would say. I've put myself through a lot of really challenging projects, and
Hmm.
certainly I'm able to work on things that are lighter and more fun, um, maybe a little easier, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the work will be as interesting or um, fulfilling on the other side. Once it's over.
Yeah.
So I just I'm happy to appreciate it for what it is, and not knowing whether or not there'll be another um, experience like that that's of that caliber or scale.
And that makes perfect sense what you said there, because you don't know the future, right?
Yeah, true.
Now, like I said before, I don't want to keep you too much longer. Let you get to your back to your day. Now, before that though, was there anything that you would want to maybe talk about, let people know exist? Just kind of. It's a bad way. I'm still struggling to how to phrase this, but was there a soapbox you wanted to get on, so that way you could tell everyone what's coming up, or just what's on your mind, or what you're planning, or anything like that?
No.
Okay, then, fair enough. Well, if
Yeah,
that's the
I didn't have any agenda coming in.
well, that's definitely fine. Either way, I was, it's offered. Well, if that's the case, then Rich, I will let you get back to your Friday evening. Um, I know there's not a whole lot that can go on currently with, the state of the world, but I'll let you have some downtime and enjoy your evening.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, thanks again for joining me on the Red Tunic podcast, and a special thanks to Rich Vreeland for making some time to have this conversation with me, as well as a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for the use of his music from the title track from Road Steep.